All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you for everyone watching, who's listening. If you're watching us on the video side, I am live here at Casey's Black Rock in Black Rock, and I'm joined by my special guest, a regular when I have these type of shows, Matt Parrino. Man, what's going on, dude?
You usually got the number handy. What is this? What is this? Number 9? Number 10?
I don't even know where we're at right now. Yeah, we're live. The owner, they want somebody to be able to play darts. Go ahead, man.
Gotta
We're
play
at the
darts.
bar.
I'm actually bummed that the darts isn't happening in the background.
I know. I was saying it. There's people out there, but this is almost, we were just talking for a few minutes, so they're almost eerily quiet here for a live show because we're kind of tucked in the back here by ourselves where all the customers are up, and I'm seeing people that I know walking in here right now. I haven't seen that man in 5 years. Anyway, welcome everybody. That was a little bit of a weird start, but that's what happens when you do these live shows.
Got to be ready to adapt.
Yes.
And recover. So recover.
We're recovering.
All right, good.
We're recovering. Let's talk about these wings first.
Okay.
I wanted to come here for a reason. I'm now known as the Imperial guy because I do so many shows there, and I love Imperial.
I'm known as the wing nuts
You're
guy.
the wing nuts guy.
Yeah.
Love wing nuts. It's just nice to be able to get out somewhere and go somewhere different. And this is, without question, one of my favorite neighborhood bars in all of Western New York. This is the epitome of what I think a neighborhood bar should be.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, Vinny, I've known him for years.
Yeah.
Actually, this was, if not the first site of a live show that I did, one of the first shows. And so every time I come in here, it's just, it brings back memories of like the early days before I was doing a show with Ryan Talbot every single week.
I got a funny story
But
about
it's amazing. And the wings are delicious. We just crushed 20. What are they? Medium hot.
Medium hot, yeah.
And they're on point every time. They don't miss.
Consistent.
Traditional wings, it's a tough game to be playing in Western New York.
Yeah.
And I feel like Vinny plays it just about as well as anybody.
You know what's funny? So for people on the technical side here, 5 minutes before we started the show, I have headset mics, and I'm like, we ain't gonna need them. It's all quiet and dead back here. Literally, we get the camera rolling, and now it's cooking back here, which is good though, because now I'm
Here's the
starting to
thing.
feel the vibe a
Here's
little
the
bit.
thing. Welcome to the party, pal. I don't do that in live shows and wing nuts on those Saturday nights.
Well, you're used to this.
They are absolutely so.
Crazy.
This is just like second nature. Let's go.
Wing nut shows are fun because you interact with the fans. You give them an opportunity to go up. We'll talk about that, but I want to bring up a story that you mentioned specifically here. I remember it was I had to look it up. So I had you on a show here live from Casey's, but it was only audio. I didn't even have video at the time.
Right.
And that was in December of 2019. That was so roughly 4.5 years ago.
Wow.
And what I remember about that show isn't even so much the show itself. That was the first time I had wings here, by the way, and they were fucking amazing. I remember that. But excuse the language. But what I remember about that show specifically is we were sitting here talking afterwards, and you kind of told me like I got a little bit of a secret to tell you, and it was that you were getting ready to start a podcast. Like you were the wheels were in motion for you starting your podcast, which would become Shout, of course, and now one of the most popular podcasts out there. But at that time, last time we hooked up here at Casey's, that was just still a thought in your head. Like you were starting to go through, like I said, the process of putting it all together.
It's funny to think back to what I wanted it to be or what I kind of envisioned it being and what it's actually turned out to be. It's better than I ever imagined.
Sure.
It's like it's turned into something. And when we were starting, like Ryan and I were still kind of in the infancy of our partnership on the beat, like how we cover the team. And so projecting what we were going to be like in like a weekly episodic sports podcast was just a complete dart throw. Like ironic since they're playing darts right next to them. And luckily, I mean, I hit the bullseye with the guy that I get to do it with. We're so compatible in so many ways. It can't just be like
it's weird that you guys are, because you guys are totally compatible, but it's almost weird.
I know,
because Ryan is a great dude, but kind of like in a weird comedic type of way. Well, I'm talking about his humor.
We're different guys, but we share a lot of like we have similarities in the sense that we're both very family oriented.
Very.
And we both like love talking about the Bills. Like it's our passion. It was our passion before we did it professionally. And I think like we've always kind of shared that part of it. And like he's a teacher, my wife's a teacher, now a principal, and like we have so many similarities. I love his family. We just have connected from the beginning, and that sometimes like the people that you become closest with aren't the people that you would have projected yourself to be best friends with necessarily, but they're the people that like compliment you the best. How boring would it be if the person I think is the most like me, I spend all my time with all the time?
Yeah.
Like I don't like myself that much.
It's just crazy to think how much has changed in 4 years for you personally. Again, you were kind of you're relatively new in this market as a Bills reporter, at least anyway. And we were talking about this over wing series cases before the show. The turnover is starting to come. Guys like yourself that 5 years ago were newish on this beat are becoming the grizzled veterans of sorts, because like just say over the last year or so, I mean, Howard Simon's retired from WGR just recently. Adam Beane is semi-retired for the most part from Channel 2. Now news has come out about Murph, leaving his gig and retiring after 3 decades. So it's like the people that have been around forever, they're exiting for various different reasons. And now guys like yourself and like maybe on the hockey side, Fairburn, Joe Biscaglia, a lot of, people not new, but newish. It felt like 5 years ago, newish. Now you guys are becoming, I don't want to call you old, buddy, but kind of like the old guard here of the Buffalo media.
I'll be 42 this year.
Stop it.
I'm old.
I don't want to hear that shit, dude.
Just about anybody. But I like still view like I feel like there are some veterans in the room still.
Oh, absolutely.
Your
Lots
favorite
of them.
And everybody's favorite at home, John Warrow, still crushing it on the beat.
Oh, of course.
Your best buddy.
That's my guy, man.
Tim Graham, who's been on the beat for what
Love
seems
Tim.
like years. I know he's kind of like bounced back and forth. He did the news thing for a while, did the Sabres for a while, but he's covered the Bills for as long. I mean, Jay really is like the elder statesman. Like if you on the beat, there every day, in the building every day, on the road traveling.
Sure.
Like Jay is like, the vet. I mean, he's the PFWA president. Joe B is the vice president. And I'm still kind of like, hopefully just entering my prime. Like that's how I approach it. Like I'm hoping, but I only can say that for a couple more years. And then it's going to be like, oh yeah, okay. Like I am getting kind of old here.
I should let people know, by the way, here at Casey's Block. So if you've never been here before, technically, I mean, if you're a Bills fan and you cover the Bills, I'm a Bills fan. This is a Bills podcast. I'm objective about it, but we're in enemy territory of sorts. This is an official Kansas City Chiefs backer bar. The owner, Vince, great dude, is a lifelong big Chiefs fan, and there is a lot of Kansas City Chiefs stuff flowing around this bar right now.
Yeah.
I love it, man.
You got to be really comfortable with your fandom as a Bills fan to walk into this place and not get objectively pissed off.
No.
But I think it's cool. Like, just think about all the cities that we go to over the course of the season. There's always a Bills backers bar everywhere that you go, and representing this, the team in different cities. Like, it's cool. I love the bar. Vinny's a great guy. He's actually the guy that brought the what was it? The Lombardi Trophy to the parade a couple years ago, and he had got a picture with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's just a cool fan story.
Yeah,
Even if you're a Bills fan, I think you kind of like get kind of pumped up for a guy like that to live a dream like that and have a moment like that after the Super Bowl. Everybody will want to be that.
Sure. Right? Yeah, and legit, this is one of the nicer neighborhood sports bars that you'll find anywhere. I mean, the TVs, just the back here.
He's always coming up with like cool stuff. Like I had a chicken sandwich here a couple years ago. Blew the doors off, dude. It was just phenomenal. The wings are amazing, but everything you order here, the beers are always cold. I love this place.
Yeah, and there's a lot to
Good
do
buddy
back
of mine
there
was
too.
a bartender here for a while.
What bars have skee ball, man?
I know.
Skee ball, a pinball machine.
This is an elite game room.
The boxer thing, you can punch the bag.
Yeah, I think I'd probably punch harder than you. That's just
probably,
my guess. That's
probably,
just my guess.
Probably. Talk about, before we get into some Bill stuff here, we kind of want to circle back to your live shows that you do at Wingnuts with Ryan. By the way, you also did a show recently at what was it, the golf place? I caught that too.
Kitchen Bar inside the Dome on World.
Yeah, that was cool.
We're coming back July 11th. Break some news here.
You had Butler as the guest there. I watched that. I caught that show. But anyway, generally speaking, your shows at Wingnuts are very interactive with fans. Like quite often, you guys, first of all, you're pointing out the audio over a PA,
Right.
so people when they come there, they can hear it. Like right now, the only people hearing us are if they're within earshot of us.
Yes.
But like at Wingnuts, pretty much anywhere in the restaurant, people will hear your show. And like I said, you often give fans a chance to come up and whatever your topic is that day. Talk about that, like the interaction that you have with the fans and how that's different than say a typical shout episode that you'll do remotely with Ryan or whoever your guest might be.
The idea for the fan involvement has been like, think about the live shows that we do, and we're interacting with like the comment section on YouTube.
Right.
We're almost bringing that experience to the bar, right? Like if you have a comment, if you want to get something on the podcast bad enough, just come up and let's talk about it. We could actually almost have like a quasi like call-in radio style exchange. Now, some of it's gone off the rails. Like we had a Patriots fan, Patriots week.
I was there for that.
Hammered.
I was there for that.
A Chiefs fan, Chiefs week. I think it was playoff week.
Mm-hmm.
Like it gets a little bit rambunctious, but no, I think fans have really enjoyed it. And more so than anything, the live shows, what they're about is like, I tell this to people all the time. It's about like fans getting a chance to talk Bills, like off the cuff, like in a way that you don't normally get to do with like beat reporters. And I try to be that for fans.
But do you get a little bit nervous or at least wary that like you might get the wrong person that's maybe had too much to drink and they're going to get up on that stage and you're giving them a live microphone? You know how they say control your controllables? Like that's one of the few things that's kind of like outside of your control. Does that like cross? I'm not saying does that dominate your mind, but like does that cross your mind? Like for an example, Tone Pucks is lurking around here.
Right.
I'm waiting for him to sabotage this show at any time right now. That's kind of in the back of my mind. But like, well, seriously, when you're at a live show, that's something that at least you got to be wary of.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that, well, first of all, you could tell because most people that are coming on to a live show like that, there's nerves involved, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody's coming up there free as a bird and like ready to kind of like take the mic, I know what I'm potentially dealing with. The Chiefs fan especially was liquored up, and it was a little bit like there was some language. But listen, it was a Saturday night. We're on YouTube. It's okay. Like you can swear a little bit. But no, I never have a huge issue because Ryan and I have such a good rapport that I feel like we could take any situation and kind of like bring it back to the middle if we have to, you know?
How long did it take you, the process of getting comfortable, not so much doing a podcast, we've talked about that before too, but just like doing these live shows because it is a different element. You know, like say right now, if we were doing this on StreamYard and you were my guest and you were remote, I'm remote, and something went wrong, we're like, oh, you know, whatever. I'm going to edit that shit out afterwards.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you're live, and especially in your case, when you're live with a pretty significant size audience, that's kind of a process. How about that? Just that process of being in the moment and being comfortable with a live audience like that.
Yeah, that part of it's always, I know that they're there for us and there's a lot of regulars. So that kind of helps put you in a place where you feel comfortable. But we don't have this. Like, when we go to a show, all of it is back up here.
I can't do that.
And I'm just rifling through things. And the reason I do it that way is because I want it to feel as much like a conversation as it can. And I feel like if I come in with a bunch of bullet points,
sure,
I'm going to follow it at the cost of being natural. And so I feel
you can
like, lose
your flow.
Yeah. So I feel like if I have 3 or 4 things that I know we want to get to over the course of the show, and I'll get to that and it can be as long or short as we want it to be. And sometimes we'll get out to these live shows and it's really, there's a lot of people there. Maybe we make it a little bit shorter because we want to spend more time with the people there. It's more about the event than it is about the podcast, if that makes any sense, which is weird because people are coming to watch a live podcast.
Have you thought about if this team wasn't good? And here's what I mean. Fans right now are excited about the team. If things work out or not, you know, they've fallen short in the playoffs, but they're getting to the playoffs. They're good. Let's say it was Shout, a Buffalo hockey podcast. All right. And you went 13 straight years. You don't make the playoffs. The majority of Sabres fans are really annoyed. They're tired of it. They're pissed off. They're probably going to be a little more passive aggressive towards you, you know, and anything you say, you put out there.
I've got a lot of passive aggressive stuff this offseason, actually. We'll talk about that in a minute. First of all, there would never be Shout, a Buffalo hockey podcast.
What would it be?
Who are you talking to here? Okay, I would do a UB basketball or football podcast
right, that's fair.
before I would do a Sabres podcast. Not a hockey guy. Sorry.
No, you're definitely not a hockey guy.
But no, that's a good question and something to think about. I almost think that it would be bigger. The podcast would be bigger because people would be yearning for that community more than ever to be like, I mean, really, if you think about it now, even with the success the Bills have had, part of it is just like sharing in this collective misery of like finally having a good team that just now can't get over the hump against a new nemesis. There's that like push to get over the hump. And so I think that brings a lot of people together. And the show, more than anything else, the live show, is for like the community that's been built to get together. Like I have a guy, his name's Mark. He lives in Syracuse, outside of Syracuse, drives up for every Wingnut show. Every Wingnut show, he's there with his wife every single time. And it's almost like, in a way, he's become part of my family. Like I see him every single month. He's a subscriber to the Shout Insider text line. So I'm texting with him 2 or 3 times a week. And you become part of each other's lives in a way that, you know, if I was just DMing you back and forth on Twitter or X or whatever you call it, you build a relationship, but you don't have that like that in-person, interpersonal connection with somebody. Now, you know, he's pushing for us to come to Syracuse. Like he wants us to do a show in Syracuse. We're working on it. But it's those kind of little relationships. There's a dozen, 2 dozen stories I could tell you like that. And it's just super cool.
You kind of got my intrigue a little bit when you're talking about passive aggressive. Like, how's this offseason been for you? This is the time of year, or is it not the time of year, where you kind of get content creator wise a little bit stuck in the mud? Not completely. I mean, you can always come up with, you know, kind of fresh ideas and stuff to talk about on the show. But this is the one time of year, you know, the draft's over, like mini camps haven't really even started yet, stuff like that, where you might get a little bit stuck. Is that like this time of year for you a little bit? Like you've kind of been on the podcast circuit, by the way, lately.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I've seen you on a couple other shows. Which is good. I like that. You've always been.
I like going on a lot of.
I've complimented you that for years now. I actually think that's important.
You on to John Scott years ago. Remember?
Yes.
The first time you had him on the podcast.
Absolutely.
You got to get John Scott on. I'm getting the next guy on, Andy Young. I've known Andy Young, who is now the Bills reporter for Spectrum since John went over to Channel 2. I've known him going back to when I was a high school reporter at the Tonawanda News, and he was at YNN, which was Spectrum before that. He's been covering the Bills for years. They mixed him. They put him over on news for a while. He's great. He's now taking over the Buffalo End Zone podcast. I went on with him this week.
Yeah.
He is great. For my money, Andy is should be in a pound for pound conversation. Like he's super great. I know you asked me about the offseason. I'm going to get there, but I want to put him over because
I love that term. Put him over.
There's so many. I'm a wrestling guy at heart from back in the 90s.
I know
like
you are.
Not anymore. This John Cena business really threw me off for a couple of years, but I will say I'm back.
Are you back?
I'm back.
Nice.
Roman Reigns brought me back, man.
All right, good. I never left.
Let's be honest. I never brought me back, but
right,
you know,
but you're putting him over. Yeah,
I've liked him too. So Andy Young, go follow him. He does a great job. Him and Kevin Carroll over on the podcast. The offseason's been weird because I got to be honest with you. I like a lot of what Brandon Beane typically does, right?
Yeah.
Like across the board. Like he's the guy that found Josh Allen. He's been the guy that has pivoted at multiple position groups multiple times over the course of Josh Allen's career in a successful way. Go back to when the receivers weren't right with Kelvin Benjamin and Andre Holmes. Brought in Cole Beasley and John Brown. Reimagined it. Helped elevate Josh Allen. When the offensive line was terrible, he made changes. When it was not perfectly a fit, he made more changes. They brought in a good coach. Now, that kind of goes more to Sean McDermott. I think he's done a good job finding assistant coaches. But I can see why the Bills moved on from Stefon Diggs. I can see why this was the time. I can see why, and I've made the argument that you have to be able to see 2-3 years down the road when you have a ticking clock at quarterback. And so a lot of the moves that they've made, I've liked. I put out a wide receiver free agent target list at the beginning in the insider text in February. Number 1 was Odell Beckham Jr. People killed me for it. Number 5 was Chase Claypool.
Yeah.
It was Chase Claypool. I like the idea of taking, and I know you don't, and we don't have to really go down that path if you don't want to, but there's no investment here. It is a minimum contract. It is a, let's see what he's like once you get him inside the building, and if it doesn't work out, guess what? He's going to get cut like all these other guys. Anyway, the Bills can't spend a lot of money this offseason. They can't trade for Brandon Ayuk. They can't trade for T. Higgins. And oh, by the way, who was it that made the oh no, I don't want to mess this up. I want to give them their credit. T. Higgins, if you go back and look at his combine production, it's almost identical to Keon Coleman's.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And somebody kind of came out and, oh no, it's my buddy Mark. He goes by Sid Vicious on Twitter. Are you familiar with him at all?
I don't think so.
I'm putting him over. He called into One Bills Live. I'm putting everybody in this,
put him over,
this episode.
man.
He called into One Bills Live this week. I happen to be driving and listening, and I don't even think I texted him, so I'm going to have to DM him. And he said, if you go back and watch T. Higgins' combine and look at the numbers, identical to Keon Coleman. What do Bills fans want right now? They want to trade for T. Higgins.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? Maybe Keon Coleman is this draft's version of that. So I think Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have built up a ton of equity with the way that they've handled things over the course of the last 7 years. And I see a path. Now, if it doesn't go right, I reserve the right to evaluate it in real time, which I feel like I do a pretty unbiased job at in season. When things aren't going well, I'm going to call it out. But in terms of the remake and the revitalization of this roster with the cap constraints that they had, I like a lot of the moves that they made. And I think that you're going to look back in 4 or 5 months, and a lot of the people that might be upset right now with some of the things that have happened are going to be the same people that are shouting from the rooftops like, big baller Beane, like, you got this guy, this guy, this guy. It's all great. It's all well and good. Like, I can see the path, and I'm trying to lay that out for people. And some people are like, well, join the negativity train with me. I just want you to scream into the ether like Nate Geary and Patrick Moran about all these different moves. I come at it from a place of logic, and I could see the logic in a lot of the moves that Beane's made this offseason.
All right, so
not that you don't, and not that Nate doesn't. I'm not throwing shots here.
It's
Nate
okay.
Called me out. He doesn't like Chase Claypool either.
Nate is also a fellow Notre Dame fan like myself, and he was good at Notre Dame, but saw issues even back then. Here's my thing about Chase, and this is where I don't agree about it being like no harm, no foul. If he stinks, you cut him.
Right.
I get that. I understand the concept of that. But my mindset is this: because you signed Chase Claypool, that's another receiver that they're not going to sign. Like there's someone else that they're not going to bring into camp.
Who do you want?
I don't know.
That's the problem. I
openly agree.
It's
I want to know Odell Beckham Jr.
Yeah, I did too.
And that's kind of what made me set me off
on my show.
That made me extra angry because it happened on the same day.
I want to know why the Bills weren't more aggressive in OBJ, because they flirted with the idea a couple years ago.
Yeah,
and it didn't even seem like they were in on that. So I'd like to know why that's the case. We haven't heard from Brandon Beane. We haven't heard him talk about why they're giving Chase Claypool this opportunity. So it's hard for me to give you my 100% take on this whole thing. I'm just trying to see all of the different thoughts or the thought process that went into this. And there's a lot of it I like. And the biggest reason why is he's never played with a quarterback like Josh Allen. None of these guys have. KJ Hamler hasn't.
That's fair.
Curtis Samuel, the list of quarterbacks this guy has played with. So I think if you're projecting this wide receiver room with the change just at quarterback, I think that you have to expect an uptick in their production.
I feel like I know who Chase Claypool is. And every rep he gets in training camp, every time his number is called, that's Hamler's number that's not, or that's Shaver's number who's not. I just don't think
You're the big Shavers guy?
No.
It's okay. That's who you want.
I'm absolutely not.
Tyrell Shavers. You heard Brandon Beane.
I don't know enough about
him.
No, I don't know enough about him, and I don't even know a lot of these receivers. I think, and I was talking with Tone about this on the show just the other night, I think it was kind of a frustration. Chase Claypool might have been the victim of like a culmination of a lot of things. Like I thought because you mentioned Stefon Diggs, and I've kind of played both sides of the fence, which is shitty of me.
That's okay.
But when Stefon Diggs got traded, I was in full support of it.
Okay.
Full support. I'm like, and you get a 20-25 second. I get that. Sweet. We're going into this draft now. And now Brandon Beane's got more ammunition. Maybe they go get a top 10 guy. Maybe they trade up for Brian Thomas Jr. Maybe they don't like those guys as much. There was just a lot more possibilities. And you brought up a good point at dinner, which I know you'll bring up, and you'll be right too. You're going to be right. But my mindset at the time was I support Diggs being traded because I thought it was a chess move and something else was coming besides drafting a rookie. With or without Diggs, they were going to take a rookie. We didn't know who. And then after, I'm like, all right, well, they're going to swing a trade for somebody, or they're going to sign Odell Beckham Jr. or somebody. So when it was the Bills quietly signed 3 guys, including Chase Claypool, who wasn't even important enough for like Adam Schefter or somebody to say per sources. Chase, like the team announced that shit. That's how we all pretty much found out about it. So I think he was kind of a culmination of frustration that you traded Stefon Diggs, which was cool, but you didn't really get anything for him. And then my mindset became, well, if I would have known on April 3rd that trading Stefon Diggs was just going to result in drafting Keon Coleman and signing Chase Claypool and nothing else, I would have rather just found a way to work with Stefon Diggs for one more year. You would know this a hell of a lot better than me. You're in that locker room. You cover the team full time. Maybe that's just wasn't doable at this point, which is what I'm guessing. But tell the people what you told me over dinner about Diggs in the back half, what you're getting with Stefon Diggs, because you were right. It was a good point.
Okay, so I'll start there, and then I'll come in with a little bit more on what you were just alluding to, because I think that's a very interesting talking point. Like what they ended up getting in place of Stefon Diggs versus trying to work things out with him. I think that'll be interesting to talk about.
Sure.
So first off, I think a lot of people are operating on Diggs, whatever they think about him and his role with this team, like the guy that was here in 2020 and 21 when he was absolutely taking the league by storm with Josh Allen. He's had the most targets in his career. He was breaking Bills receiving records. Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs were on the cover of Sports Illustrated Kids, best buddies in the world.
Sure.
That wasn't the case the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And more importantly, the last 12 games of last season, Stefon Diggs stunk. Like, let's be honest. Yeah. Like, he wasn't very good. Khalil Shakir had better stats than Stefon Diggs, who was set to make $26 million this year. In this league, you have to know when to get off of a player that's about to tank, right?
Yeah.
To your point, to get a second-round pick back for him when Keenan Allen yielded a 4th, Amari Cooper a couple years ago yielded a 5th, I thought that was really good work by Brandon Beane.
Me too.
So here's the other part of it. What the Bills have now. It's a lot of question marks, right?
Sure.
But what did they do last year in the draft? In the first round.
Took a tight end. They took a pass catcher.
What did they do to get that tight end? They traded up to get that tight end, right? Yeah. So Brandon Beane didn't trade up in this year to get the weapon. He did it last year. And I don't think Dalton Kincaid could ever be or realize the potential that he has in the eyes of the Bills, their front office, their coaching staff. If you have a Stefon Diggs or someone like Stefon Diggs in this offense that's going to be a target share monster, that's going to command 12 targets a game, how are you going to feature Dalton Kincaid in any way? Now you have a wide receiver group that has a bunch of different flavors. You're going to let the best guys win, and none of them are going to command a big share of the targets. And so now you are going to get to see what it looks like with Dalton Kincaid potentially as weapon 1 in this offense. And if it doesn't work, guess what you'll have next offseason? A boatload of money to go figure it out.
And draft capital.
In draft capital.
You're 100%. Everything you say about Stefon Diggs, I completely agree with. I guess what I want to ask you is, you're not going to, of course, know specifics, but to what extent did the relationship get bad between Stefon and Josh that it came
definitely a factor?
Because it had to have been a factor that they could not, because the money, they were going to eat the money this year, whether he played or not. Right. And they traded him and they ate it all this year. In fact, they actually lost another $3 million by trading him this year, which was worth it because of what they got, the second round pick. His production, I agree with you 100%. And I think that's the primary reason. But to me, it's clear that relationship, not maybe one thing. I think Tim Graham, I was talking to him before, and he said it was like death by 1,000 like microaggressions or something like that he said. Is that kind of how you feel like when it comes, whether it's Stefon and Josh Allen, their relationship, or Stefon's relationship with Sean McDermott, or just other people in the organization? He just didn't seem happy. You wanted out.
Yeah. I'm sorry that I did the podcast circuit because I kind of already talked about this on Andy's show.
Yeah, well, you're going to talk about it on mine.
Again. So first off, to answer your first question, there was definitely a problem with Josh and Steph, to the point where when I asked Josh about it at his press conference a month ago after Diggs was traded, he basically said, I said, what did you learn about this? Yeah. And he said, I learned that everybody operates differently, and you got to put the energy into getting to know how a guy ticks and then adjusting how you treat that person, right? I'm paraphrasing, like he didn't say it exactly like that. And so he learned a lesson that, like, whatever reason, we may never learn it. Maybe it'll come out on a podcast. Stefon Diggs goes on the pivot or something in 5 years.
I feel like it's coming.
And finally lets it all out, right? And so we'll learn a lot about that situation then. But what I do think the Bills did this offseason is prioritize players that are going to prioritize their relationship with Josh, which I don't know if Stefon Diggs ever did. And to Tim's point about being like death by a million cuts, I think everybody loves Stefon Diggs in that locker room. I think he was a great teammate, a great leader. I think guys leaned on him, they trusted him, and they loved him. Like, Stefon Diggs is like a guy that's like for the culture. He's super cool.
Yeah.
He's fashion oriented. Like, guys want to be like him and they want to be around him. So I don't think that was ever a problem. But if there's a divide between the star receiver and the quarterback, that is something that's going to fatigue a locker room, because it's always going to come down to sides. Like when you're in meeting rooms, when you're out on the practice field, when you're yelling back and forth, I could see a million different ways how that affected the locker room without ever actually seeing specifics, because it's such an important relationship. So if that was strained, you probably had guys on all sides, guys that were tight with Josh, guys that were tight with Diggs. And then when they all came together, when did you ever see a picture of Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs together? Right. Outside of the building? You see Dawson and Josh all the time. You saw Gabe and Josh all the time. The relationship changed over time, and the Bills chose to go in a different direction. And I have to imagine it was part of the reason.
As a fan, it makes me sad that, like, the legacy that's because Stefon Diggs had the 4 greatest seasons in receiving in the history of this franchise ever. And there's going to be maybe someday down the road, a lot of fans will choose to remember that more fondly, maybe than they do right now. But I think right now
he didn't help any of how.
No, he didn't. And a lot of it is on him. Like I said, I'm kind of a malcontent who wanted his way out, as opposed to say somebody like Jordan Poyer. I mean, Jordan Poyer is literally playing for the enemy. He's playing for the Dolphins. A little bit different though. He got cut. You know, he didn't force his way out.
Talked about how much he loves Buffalo.
Yeah.
And like, first of all, you can't fake that kind of.
I want to give you a Jordan Poyer take.
Okay.
All right. I truly believe this in my heart.
Okay.
This is how I feel. For maybe even going back years, I think Jordan Poyer's always wanted to live. He loves Florida.
Oh, 100%.
He wants to live in Florida. He loves living in Florida.
I've been in that guy's backyard. Okay. Yeah. It's hard to leave that place, dude. It is beautiful. They live right on the water.
He loves it. He driving in Lamborghini to practice 12 months a year, playing golf 12 months a year. He loves all that stuff about Florida. But I think when it comes time to put on the pads and start the season, I think he's going to miss being a Buffalo Bill. I think he misses being a Buffalo Bill, the football part. He loves the community. He was great for this community, did a lot of amazing things, but I think he's very happy in Miami, but I think he misses being a Buffalo Bill
that's a great
more
take.
than anything.
I think that's a great take. And like, you know, last year was a weird year for Poyer. Like, I think he came back to Buffalo after kind of striking out on the free agent market.
Oh yeah,
remember?
Definitely. Sure.
And I think that he felt some kind of way about that. I think he had almost mentally moved on from Buffalo, thinking that he was going to sign somewhere else, and the best deal he could get was back in Buffalo. So he came back, and he was still the same guy, but walking around the building, like, he just was different. Like, he didn't have that same, like, spark, that joy. Part of that comes from playing in the league for 10 years. I mean, it's going to fade. Like, it's hard. So I think that point, too, like, when he's got to put the pads on for Miami the first time it goes wrong, and that's an organization that just – under Mike McDaniel, even, I'm not even talking about long-term, like, when it gets real hard,
they don't have the leadership. They need Jordan Poyer types,
dude,
or what he was.
Did you watch Hard Knocks?
Yes.
Dude, I am out on Mike McDaniel, and I don't know if that's like a hot take.
I agree with you.
I don't see a bunch of guys. I've watched those
team
meetings. He's a front runner when everything's going great, but when the chips are down, are you following that guy?
No.
Like, I mean, I feel like I don't know. Like, he doesn't scream like leader to me. And that's not to be super judgmental. I don't know. I'm not always, I don't know behind the scenes, but yeah. I'm not saying the Bills are in some amazing situation with their head coach, but it has a different feel here.
When you watched Hard Knocks, I didn't watch all the episodes, but I did watch the one in the finale where they lost to the Bills.
Right.
Miami was up at halftime.
Right.
And it did not feel like they were up in that locker room. Like two others just quiet. There was no rah-rahs. Felt like there was no leadership. It felt like Miami was a team that was expecting Buffalo to come back in the second half. Watching the HBO series, that's the way it felt. And they did. So maybe they need some Jordan Poyers in their locker room.
They do. But how much is Jordan Poyer going to be able to get to that level without Micah Hyde, without all of his guys?
And what does he have left? Yeah,
I mean, he's in a secondary with Jalen Ramsey, who, I don't know, dude. I'm out on Jalen Ramsey too. But here's another thing. I think Mike McDaniel is the poster child for why Bills fans that are not content with Sean McDermott better be careful what you wish for.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Sometimes you want this offensive guru that Mike McDaniel has been billed to be, but with all of that has to come the leadership. Like, I think Kyle Shanahan is an excellent coach. I think he's a great head coach. But as great as he is, and as much of an offensive guru as he is, what's it gotten him?
Sure.
2 Super Bowl appearances, 2 Super Bowl losses. He's gotten closer to he's gotten closer to a Super Bowl than Sean McDermott, definitely. But they have the same record, like no Super Bowls on their resume.
Yeah. Here live at Casey's Black Rock with Matt Parrino. By the way, got over 800 people on the live stream, even though we started late too. So props to everybody who's actually watching this on the video side.
And subscribe on YouTube.
Yeah, I guess.
I
don't like putting myself over.
I'll put you over.
You're good at that.
I'll put this guy over.
You're a great seguer too. That's one of my favorite things about your show. Like when you transition into your ad reads and stuff, you do it effortlessly. I've always admired. And by the way, my podcast circuit comment was a compliment.
Oh, thanks.
You know, it wasn't a negative annotation there.
Listen, I'm a man of the people. I love my people. I love going on. We're all friends. Like,
I'm the old one. I'm supposed to be giving you the good advice and leading the way. And it's kind of been the role. You've been giving good advice to me that I need to start following more about social media.
Yeah.
Like I need to turn it off a little bit more than I do. I get too fired up. I get too into the weeds.
Message to social media. My new philosophy, my way of life on social media. If you don't follow me and you say something dickish to me on social media,
that's a block.
You're blocked or muted.
It's a block.
I don't block everybody that does that, but I mute most of them. And my thing is, like, there's so much negativity in the world, the regular world. I'm not going to put up with that on social media. So my new thing is I don't even engage in it. If you say something like I'll give you an example. Some guy today said, I put out a tweet about my dishwasher. I don't do my own dishes.
It was a different tweet from you.
Yeah, I don't do my own dishes, but I was just thinking about it. My wife had a school event tonight, so I was doing the dishes for her because I wanted it to be done before she gets home. And I don't do that very often. But there's a reason to that, because she puts all of the dirty dishes in the sink. And so that if they get to be a pile too high, I can't operate.
It's too much of a task.
I can't operate.
Too high a task.
I need them on the outside so I can like rinse them and then put them in the dishwasher. Anyway, I put my whole thing out on this one guy quote tweeted and he goes, "This guy pays $8 a month to a billionaire to just yap his mouth." So guess what, guy? I won't see any more replies because you're blocked, but I don't pay the $8 a month. You do the math.
Oh, okay. I got to be honest with you. 6 months ago, I might not have agreed with your philosophy. I would have been like, yeah, it's kind of petty and weak.
You kind of like it,
but I've learned not as much.
You used to.
I used to really. It's starting to get to me. I quit Twitter for 8 hours. The day of the Chase Claypool signing, I said I'm done tweeting. I'm putting out the episodes, and I'm going to use GIFs only. I'm not going to communicate with anyone anymore. That didn't even last one day.
You can't. You're addicted.
I am. All right. I want to talk about the draft before we get out of here. Now we've had some time to kind of reflect on it. Again, I'm a knee-jerk reactor. It's kind of well known. I overreact to a lot of things. I didn't love the draft at first, but as times went on and I started to learn more about these players, and I caught embedded on Bill's YouTube channel the other day as well. I've become much more fond of this draft. It makes sense. Like these seem like a lot of matchup pieces. Like Bishop especially seems like a matchup piece. And I also noticed a trend with character, and a lot of these guys like Ray Davis and Dwayne Carter was a 3-year captain at Duke, and Bishop was a captain at Utah. It seems, we've talked about this. I know you talk about it on your show with Ryan a lot. You lose a lot of leadership, man. Guys like Poyer and Hyde and Trey White and Mitch Morse and Stefon. These guys are all gone, and they got some leaders ready to come in and step up. But you're going to need that next wave too. Yeah. And it kind of feels like that had some purpose in what they were doing with this draft as well. Character, leadership, things like that. And Keon Coleman, I'm wiping the slate clean. Like
you're throwing out all of your
I never hated him. I never hated him. I was
Okay.
just like, he was not high on my list of receivers. In fairness to people like us, whether you cover the team like you do or a podcast like me or fans, Brandon Beane kind of painted a picture that you would expect a smaller, quickish, explosive separation type guy. So to go get a big body guy to me kind of felt like a little bit of a surprise, a little bit of a shock. I think maybe that's why pre-draft I never really had him high on my list. Makes sense. So what I'm telling you is that these players now, with some hindsight and thinking about it, seem to make sense what Brandon Beane did.
I was surprised that they went safety as high as they did, because it's never been a position that they valued enough.
Right.
And I don't want to say valued, but like they trust their coaching staff to develop like undrafted guys, late round guys. So I thought I would do all my mock drafts, and I think maybe in one I threw in a safety early just for, the sake of it, but I didn't really think they were going to do it.
Right.
And so when they went out and got Cole Bishop, I thought, first of all, after they, brought in a veteran like Mike Edwards, they had Cam Lewis on the roster, Taylor Rapp's expected to take one of those jobs. I'm like, they have to love this guy. And then hearing Beane talk about wanting to trade up for him too, to get him.
Yeah.
That jumped out at me. And so I'm higher on Cole Bishop now than I was during the draft process because of how much they wanted him. To me, that says more to me.
Terry Bagula was talking about him on Embedded. I don't know if you caught Embedded yet.
I didn't watch the whole thing.
All right, but Terry Bagula, we're going to get that safety. It's like Terry Bagula said that. I was like, oh, so that was not an exaggeration. Like I didn't, at first I'm like, well, GMs always say they wanted this guy. They were going to move. They did. So anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Because sometimes doesn't it feel like a draft pick can be like, oh, we like this guy. We like where we got him. And it ends there. But like, you don't oftentimes get like the kind of intel that like this was a guy that we wanted to get up to get. Even Coleman, when they asked, was he the pick at 28? Beane came back and was like, yeah, he was one of a couple guys that we would have taken at 28.
Yeah.
They weren't trying to trade up for Keon Coleman.
Right.
Like, Bishop was like a guy high on their board that I think you get excited about. So I started doing work on Coleman 2 or 3 weeks before the draft. I kind of wrote him off during the draft process. I was with you. I heard that they were super high on Thomas Jr. So I thought that was going to be the target. And, there's a lot of smoke around draft season. So it wasn't anything that I was willing to report. And we'll find out over time if that was necessarily even the case. But once I saw a report that Coleman and the Bills could be necessarily a fit, I'm like, I better get up on this guy. The more you read about him, the more you learn about him, the more you like him. And he fits as that boundary X. And that's something they've been missing for a long time. I never thought even Gabe Davis was great in that role because he has limitations. Like as a pass catcher, like go watch the gauntlet drill. Of course, they talk about the speed in that drill, right? But the fluidity of the way that he caught the ball, the seamless nature of catching the ball, dropping it, catching the ball, dropping it. That's about as good of a drill you'll see as any. They need somebody that they can rely upon in that role. When Josh throws you the ball, if it hits your hands, you're going to catch it.
Right.
And that was the problem with Gabe Davis.
Right.
So if you get just Gabe Davis supercharged with Coleman, I think you're happy about that. If you're going to feature Kincaid more. Love Dwayne Carter. My favorite pick in the draft, me and Ryan have talked a lot about this. Cedric Van Pran Granger. Dude, this dude, Aaron Cromer's seal of approval. When you got that, I'm all in on the guy. This dude is an offensive line whisperer. Every movie he's made that he's had a say in since he took over has been perfect. And that's why I'm not worried about the move for McGovern from left guard to center. Cromer's signing off on it. He sees his line. He knows what's going to be the best version of his offensive line. I never thought Mitch Morse was a Cromer fit, and he made it work with him. But I always thought it was kind of that was going to run its course, and he was going to want his new center. Plus, I really like the International Pathway Program.
Yeah.
You got to be careful saying Jordan Mailata. Like, that might be a once-in-a-lifetime type of thing. But for the chance at that, I think it's worth the spin.
Man.
I know.
No, holy
he looks like a
shit.
freak.
You know, sometimes when you look at a draft afterwards, you don't think about it at the time, but then it's like it makes so much sense. Taking a center just made 100%. So much sense because last year you got Mitch Morse. All right, if he gets hurt or something happens with him, you can put Ryan Bates in there, or you can move McGovern over to center. Right now, as things stand, they really didn't have
Alex
anybody.
Anderson.
Yeah. Yeah,
and he's
so-
more of a tackle.
Right. So that makes sense. The one pick at the time I did not like, and it's not because I don't like him as the player. It's just I just didn't understand why you would go get a running back instead of that second receiver, which again leads into my frustration more about Chase Claypool. It's like I thought they were going to double dip a receiver, and they didn't, which is fine now. I get that. But like at first I didn't like the pick, but now I'm like, I look at the highlights of this guy and I'm the type of player he is, the type of character he is, and he's going to fit in this offense just fine.
Pencil in a running back in round 2, 3, or 4 every 2 years.
Yeah.
For the rest of Brandon Beane.
Because you don't want to give him a second contract, right?
James Cook could take the league by storm over the next 2 seasons. The Bills aren't paying him.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think they're going to pay a running back. Like, they're not in that business. Maybe he turns into the next Christian McCaffrey. And then they're like, okay, we'll pay that. But that's what it's got to be, I think, for Brandon Beane to consider it. And it's got to be that much a part of their offense. One thing we've talked about on the show, what happens if we get early in the season and James Cook is still dropping passes? Like, that was a problem
last year.
Everybody's talking about Cook as being like this big part of the passing game. How can you be a big part of the passing game if you're not trusted to catch it when it's thrown to you? And I think they did a good job of not like totally putting him in the doghouse at any point last year. He's a young player in year 2. Most snaps he's ever played. If you put up his entire football career, he played more snaps last year. So it's going to take some time. But that's something I'm kind of watching with Cook.
Ray Davis is a good pass catcher. I think he caught like 7 touchdowns last year coming out of Kentucky. Less Bills thing here. Like right now, when you look at this roster, we can sit here and talk about a lot of good things. And there are a lot of things to like about this team. It's a playoff team, and they're still a very good football team. But like, what do you think is the singular biggest red flag like right now? Like we'll go, which is funny. I just said red flag. It reminds me, Hugh, Nate Gary, we're at Mulberry couple of years ago. We're doing a podcast training camp.
Dawson
we
Knox
talked about
in.
the same exact thing. And at the time you said Dawson Knox, and ironically Dawson Knox is sitting 15 feet away from us having dinner with his then girlfriend. He actually went on to have a good season. But as things stand right now, what would you consider the biggest red flag? Maybe besides receiver, because that might be a little low hanging fruit, but actually, I do got one other thing I want to hit on after this. So I lied. This is not the last
I'll be quick
thing.
with this.
This is the second thing. What's your red flag?
Edge rusher.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Can we sit here and say that we're expecting Von Miller to be anything like he was 2 years ago?
No.
It could happen.
Sure.
I can win the lottery, right?
Yeah.
There's so many question marks about who is the guy on the outside for this team. Is it Greg Rousseau? Maybe. But he still hasn't even had a 10-sack season in 3 years in the league.
Seems like a 6 to 8 sack guy. Yeah.
Nice player. 6 sacks capped so far.
Yeah.
They're expecting him to take a huge jump. And so we'll see. Maybe he can be the guy that takes that next step. I like Javon Solomon, but he's not going to have a huge role year 1 if he even makes the team. And then after that, Dwayne Smoot, he had an Achilles a couple years ago. He was terrible last year.
Yeah.
That's why he was available when the Bills got him. Let me tell you something about Dwayne Smoot. And this is not to crap on the guy. This isn't Leonard Floyd coming in here, okay?
Yeah.
Coming off of a Super Bowl run a couple years ago when he had 10 plus sacks. Leonard Floyd had 10 or more sacks or around 10 sacks for like 4 straight seasons. Yeah. Smoot's not that guy. So
I agree.
They're not really great on the interior. I don't know who's producing consistently on the edge for them.
I agree with you. When it comes to receiver, you got enough guys. It could be kind of receiver by committee. You can't really have pass rush by committee. Somebody's got to stand out and matter. I actually do want to circle back because I do want to ask you about Keon Coleman specifically. I'm not being the old guy, the old fucking aggressive guy, but not a serious question. No. I like him. He's fun. I'm sure it was a real treat for you guys sitting in the press room for him to come out. Was that as cool in person as it seemed like watching it on the internet? He came out, went to the cookies. Yep. He was hilarious. That was fun.
I will admit, this might be where my bias shows. If I get a guy that's a really good story, maybe I put him over a little bit more than I should. I don't know. Because this is what I'm in this for, right? Like the guys that like are in that locker room that you can have a conversation with and have something real to say. You could tell their personality is real. Like it's the introductory press conference. Everybody's performing, so I don't want to take too much away from this, but everything that I've read, everything that I've listened to, people rave about the guy that he is. And to me, that's what they needed. They needed the next receiver that they brought in here to be, whether it be in the draft, free agency, to be a guy that was going to get along, that was going to be somebody that prioritized Josh Allen. And yeah, he was so much fun. And that was me in the background. If you heard him say, these cookies are really good. And then Heather Prusak came up off the side and said, they're great. They're really great. I already had 2. And I yelled that back. And I was like, yeah, her husband had 4. Dude, John, for as good shape as he is, he puts down those cookies in the meeting room. It's amazing. I'm amazed.
Yeah, he seems like a lot of fun. And I would assume Josh Allen had some input on what receiver they took. And going back and watching Embedded and just putting logic together, feels to me like it was going to be Coleman or Leggett. Like they got to the bottom of the round and they would have been good with either. Not saying they liked one more than the other. That's kind of how it felt. But back with Coleman, the one thing I'm going to say, and this concerns me a little bit, just with life, the way people are, people like to build you up to knock you down.
Right.
And the fans are loving it right now. They're eating it all up. He's doing a lot of media, a lot of podcasts. He was just at a restaurant working the register, really good laughs. But at some point, your boy's got to be able to play because he's got like those Ocho Cinco vibes. Chad Johnson, like really likable, cool, fun. You want to be around that. You want to see that. But you better play like him too. Because like if you got Ocho Cinco vibes, but you play like Trent Sherfield, fans are going to turn on you pretty quick and call you, the next James Hardy or Calvin Benjamin or somebody like that. That's a little bit concerning to me.
No, I think that you're on point there. The thing that's interesting about the Bills and Brandon Beane and his department, this is the first time they've ever taken a risk at wide receiver. This is the first receiver they've drafted in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, crazy.
Since they took over the job. And
I like him too. I want to be clear about that. I've come to like him.
There are some red flags with his scouting report, what people said about him, what they're going to ask him to be. And now, because the expectations, because the personality are skying through the roof, now you're like, okay, if he ends up just being a little bit better version of Gabe Davis, is that enough? And it'll be enough if they eventually find their next Stefon Diggs.
Right.
But, and maybe that ends up being Kincaid in a way because he turns into their version of Kelsey
Shakir
or whatever.
Gives you a little more.
Shakir gives you more.
I
think Samuel has a chance to be really good in this offense. And, I don't think people are giving Samuel the kind of respect he deserves. He's played in a pretty shitty offense for the last couple of seasons. And I thought he pretty much made him and McLaurin made Heineke look like a player at times. I mean, he led the league in passing yards, I think. So I think you add Samuel into the mix. You have all these other pieces. You still got one of the best quarterbacks, if not the second best quarterback in the NFL behind center.
I feel like Josh Allen could drag almost any team to 10 wins, no matter what. And with Samuel at the time, I was like, why are they signing a slot guy? But now I'm like, well, they probably knew what they were doing with Stefon. Yeah, for sure.
And I think Shakir's got a
Diggs was
more,
still there at the time when I said that.
True. And I think Shakir has more boundary potential than we've seen.
I like him.
I do too.
I think he's yet to play.
What does Sean
football.
McDermott do so well?
What does he do so well? He coaches defense.
Right? Like there's huge turnover on defense, a lot of question marks on defense. We were all like freaking out about Tremaine Edmonds to Terell Bernard last year or whatever it was going to be. And that ended up being an upgrade. Like I'm pretty sure that they have a plan in place. I have concerns about that defensive line. Obviously, I've talked about the edge rusher position, but I think Sean McDermott, if you're going to bet on somebody to figure it out on defense, I feel like he will.
Terell Bernard is my worst take ever. I called him trash last year at training camp.
Dude.
I thought he was trash at camp. I'm like, you seriously, this is what you're going to do is you're going to have either Terrell Bernard or Tyrell Dodson take Tremaine Edmonds' spot. Got 2 more questions for you. Not Bill's
quickly
stuff.
On Bernard.
Good.
Before, what was the knock on him during camp? Couldn't stay healthy. Got banged up.
Missed preseason.
End of the year, biggest game of the season. He wasn't there. That's a problem. Like,
how surprised are you at how he emerged? I mean, holy shit, dude. I mean,
I was surprised.
Quick answer. I don't want to keep you all night, but
I wasn't predicting that.
Yeah, so it's not just me.
No, I thought that, like, to be honest with you, my one interaction with him that stood out from his rookie season was after he absolutely stunk it up. Your boy Tone Pox is not happy. I think he just lost his parlay.
I hope he lost.
Beep, 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 beep. Remember he stunk against the Jets in his one start for Milano. Yeah. And in those situations, a lot of times vets will like take guys and like push the media out and not let you talk to him, and almost like, no, he's not talking type of thing.
Right.
Bernard, they kind of tried to do that for him, and Bernard was like, no, I'll take questions. And he answered every single question.
No, I like him.
To me, I was like, that's some leadership right
He's
there.
got some leadership in him. He's going to be a captain for this team. If you didn't have a sports podcast or you got tired of doing Shell for whatever reason, and you could do a podcast, but it's got to be not a sports podcast. What would be something interesting enough to you that you might want to do a podcast? Now, we're not talking 3 times a week. Even if it was just something once a week. Like if you wanted to have some type of non-Bills or non-football podcast, what would be something potentially that could interest you?
Non-sports, you said?
Well, at least non-football. I know it ain't going to be hockey.
It'd be easy because I would just go MMA. I don't know, man. Like, if you think about my life and what I actually spend my time doing,
I think you could have a good parent podcast between you and your wife.
Yeah, that could be something.
I think you and your wife could have a really good parent. I think you guys.
Yeah.
I think you guys could have a really good
family, like
podcast.
the Modern Family podcast.
I legitimately love your wife, man. She is one of my
the best.
favorite social media followers. I love the photos on Facebook. I said it's for dinner. You guys got the most adorable girl, most photogenic girl in the history. That is funny.
She's so bummed that she wasn't here tonight.
Oh.
I said, I think this is like the first one that we've done together that she hasn't been at.
Yeah,
a couple.
I can think
but
of
day job, man. Got to pay the bills.
Last question here. We'll end with a Buffalo question. All right, so we're here at Casey's Black Rock. To me, and I've said this, and I'll say it again, this is one of the most underrated spots
for sure
in all of Western New York. Whether I'm talking I'm talking the whole ordeal, whether it's for wings, get some drinks, watching games, chilling out on the back, playing some games, just socializing the vibes. I love this bar. It's one of the most underrated places to me in all Western New York. I want you to name something. It doesn't have to be a specific place, but something about Buffalo that is underrated. And then I want you to name.
Giving me these questions before I come.
It's too easy. You're a polished pro. You're gonna be able to handle this. I want you to give me something about Buffalo, anything about Buffalo, a person, a thing, an event, something that's underrated. And then I want you to give me something about Buffalo that's overrated.
Wow. All right.
I ain't putting you on the spot.
What's yours?
I got all these notes and I didn't even really use
What's yours?
Underrated Summers.
I feel like Summers are properly rated.
Underrated. All right. I take that back. All right, you're right. Now I kind of screwed myself here. All right, that you can't call that underrated. That's a good.
You really put me on the spot here, dude.
I
I'm struggling myself.
So many. It's got to be something food related because everyone just associates Buffalo with wings,
right?
And Buffalo has got so many awesome spots,
right,
for things like beef on weck and stuff like that. Which, by the way, I know you lived out in Vegas. Do people know what beef on weck is in Vegas?
No. Nobody
in
knows
Florida.
what beef on weck outside of Buffalo
in Florida, nobody even knew what the hell that shit was. All right, I'm gonna have to come back to that. Overrated. There's a lot of things about Buffalo that's overrated, man.
Wow.
Yeah, Weber's is overrated. Loganberry is overrated.
Oh, Weber's mustard.
Yeah, Weber's mustard sucks.
All right.
Blue cheese is overrated. So,
dude, you're putting me on the spot here.
I know because I'm just naming everything that's overrated.
I need a little bit of time to think about.
All right,
this.
That's fair.
What's underrated about?
Well, you
Buffalo?
could put me over on your next show.
Oh, you know what's underrated?
What?
I got you.
What?
Traffic.
Yes.
There's no traffic in Buffalo.
You lived in Vegas,
the most
you would know.
Underrated part. I was talking about LA the other day. So the Bills are playing in LA again. Oh, dude, I can't stand going to LA, mostly because of the traffic. It's terrible. We are so lucky. We take it so much for granted. I got here tonight from Amherst, New York, by the Blue Water Tower in 11 minutes.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's amazing.
Right. It's a great point. You know what? That might be the most underrated thing about Buffalo. I lived in Florida, and if one accident would happen on the 75, just one, you're an hour and a half.
Oh, I got the most overrated.
All right, what is
Good thing we're doing it at the end of this podcast.
I'll give you my most overrated too.
I got the most. NHL hockey is the most overrated thing in Buffalo because memo to Buffalo. I can't believe I'm dropping this take.
You're going to get beat for this, buddy.
Here's the thing. NHL hockey outside of Western New York, pretty much everywhere outside of Western New York and Canada.
Yeah. Nobody cares.
Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
And like And this goes back to an argument I had many years ago, I think on social media. What would mean more, a Super Bowl or a Stanley Cup? And people were actually saying a Stanley Cup. I almost lost my mind. Now, this was during the Briere Drury era. So, like, of course, the Bills sucked for years. Yeah. And so, like, it almost felt like the Sabres were closer to winning the cup. Man, were those people wrong? Well, everybody was wrong because neither of the teams have won. But, and I'm not trying to dump on, like, what you like. I just want there to be a little bit of a realistic view on what hockey actually is in the U.S. The Bills winning the Super Bowl is big because the NFL is so massive that have a seat at that table, like, makes it so huge. If you won the Stanley Cup, you're probably going to run third on SportsCenter, dude.
For what it's worth, I don't disagree with you. I have made it very clear on Twitter many times that I would trade the Sabres for an NBA team.
I don't quote tweet with a yes, but I'm with you.
But you're going to catch some Pat level heat for.
I know. It's okay. I don't catch enough heat, so that's fine.
My most overrated thing, and this is a reflection of me, not him, John Worrell's radio show on Saturdays, whatever the hell.
Shout
that
out
shit
3
is.
Dubs, man. What's up, dude?
I'm just playing it. Man. All right, guys, that's gonna do it here from Casey's Black Rock. Man, this was fun. Different vibe
live,
here,
dude, on a Thursday night. That's not bad for a schmuck like you.
No, it's all because of you, buddy.
I'm just kidding.
All right, guys, have a good weekend. I'll
Thanks
be back. New shows next week.